Over the weekend, we got some very serious and devastating videos coming out of Moscow. Drone strikes striking a building in what appears to be civilian and residential areas. Now, some are saying that the area of the building that was struck, the building itself, housed secret government operations. Possibly. I think it's reasonable considering there was a drone strike in Moscow. The target probably mattered for some reason. I really don't think that whatever is going on with war, they would just randomly target some civilian building. But the videos are crazy. You got a guy driving down the highway and there's just skyscrapers and buildings along the highway, and you see a section of the building just blown out. There's a video of it happening and people screaming. A strike in Moscow signals something very serious. And a lot of people are suggesting World War III. Notably, Biden voters. I love this story from Deadline. Oliver Stone regrets voting for Biden, fears he might start World War III. Might? Yeah, fair point, might. We don't know that World War III is starting. Some think it already has. There have been prominent personalities, I believe even the Pope, who have said that World War III has begun. You know, instantly, whenever we bring up subjects like this, there's a group of people who will tweet and say, it'll never happen. I mean, it might not happen. I don't know. But just be warned. Normalcy bias, optimism bias. Two things I like to cite to tell you chance favors the prepared. And failure to plan is planning for failure. In the event war does happen, what's your plan? I mean, war is happening. And Biden has called in the reserves, not just actual reserve, but I forgot what it's called, selected reserves and ready reserves. This means that people are being recalled to active duty and they're being sent to Europe because we may be about to enter a very serious war. The nuclear weapons facility in Belarus are nearing completion, and people are concerned that this could escalate into a very dark place. I think it was a year or two ago. We saw in New York City, they ran this hilarious ad about what to do in the event of a nuclear strike. And everyone's like, why are you showing us this? Guys, because they're concerned about a nuclear strike. You know, call it whatever you want. But the intelligence agencies and government have probably had some inclination that something like this could happen for a while now. When it finally meets the public sphere, it's way afterwards. So with the buildup of troops on the Ukrainian border, I didn't think anything was going to happen. I was wrong. A lot of people thought nothing would happen. They were wrong. And while Trump was president, nothing was happening. But it seems like the intelligence agencies were preparing for something. Now here we go. Dumping tons of money into Europe for an escalating war that Russia views as against them and NATO. That in the West, they lie and they're just like, it's not really a war. We're not involved. I should say, it's not really our war. It's Ukraine fighting. Meanwhile, you've got veterans and volunteers. Sure. United States citizens are on the ground fighting. U.S. Special Forces are in the country. We're funding their weapons. We're providing the intelligence. Europe's deeply involved. Of course, this is, if it doesn't stop now, World War III. Okay, maybe not. Maybe you can call it a limited conflict between Russia, albeit not the biggest power in the world anymore, but still a very powerful nation. I don't know if you can call them a superpower. I mean, they have nuclear weapons, so that may be enough. But out of all of this, there are a few things to talk about before we get into the updates on Warfront, and that is the political ramifications of voting for Joe Biden. You know, all these people said, if you vote for Donald Trump, you're going to get World War III. And I'm like, why? Vladimir Putin was pressing the conflict in Ukraine during Obama. I was personally there on the ground in Ukraine when all of this stuff started. I was in Kiev during what they called Euromaidan, watching these protests against their president, who then fled to Russia. This was happening. The annexation of Crimea, I wasn't there for that. Donald Trump gets elected, stops. And of course, the argument from these liberals and neolibs and neocons is that Trump was giving Putin everything he wanted. And what is that? The U.S. wasn't getting involved in this psychotic garbage. ISIS was being decimated and crushed. Surprise, surprise. It seems like Vladimir Putin didn't like the fact that the U.S. had a hand in destabilizing Syria, destabilizing the Middle East, and was now pressing NATO into Ukraine. Russia didn't like that. Now, of course, competing interests. I, honestly, would prefer the U.S. to succeed over Russia. But of course, I wonder why it is that NATO is pressing on the Russian border with Estonia, Latvia, and now Ukraine. What relevance does that have to us? Europe is stagnating economically. That's what they say in some reports. I've been reading some economic reports about U.S. GDP versus European. And it would seem that a big motive for this, and again, look, I'm just some dude who reads stuff on the internet. Granted, I do know some powerful people in this world who have told me things. I don't think I have access to any real privy information. So what's really going on, man, we can only assume. But my general understanding is that what's happening with Ukraine is an effort to strengthen the economy of Europe so that they can compete with the expanding Chinese economic bloc. Now you've got the BRICS nations, which includes Russia and China. They're going to be launching a gold-backed currency. It doesn't mean the end is nigh, but for the past 10 years, in the public space, we've seen this coming. With Russia and China wanting to get off the petrodollar and trying to dump U.S. bonds, it would seem this was a long time coming. And of course, Thucydides' trap says that when a rising economic power seeks to supplant the dominant power, war is extremely likely. One report I was reading said that of the 16 times this happened throughout history, 12 resulted in major war. And a major war today, oh boy, that'll be interesting to say the least. Now, Joe Biden, I think, is a criminal individual. Granted, he's old and a bit, so let's just be polite here, suffering from a memory and capability issue. I'm trying to be nice. But I think if you look back at his family history, there's a lot of shady dealings going on. Now you've got Devin Archer is going to be testifying. We're going to hear things about Hunter and his dad. It is not good news for the United States. The United States itself is facing mass destabilization. Call it whatever you want. And I will tell you, it is like a Chinese finger trap problem. The more the intelligence agencies provoke, and they do, the more the left plays this dirty game, and the liberals, this dirty game of weaponizing the DOJ, the faster the United States will start to unravel. But you see, there are people who are so invested in this psychotic mission, racing pedal to the metal towards the edge of a cliff, that they will burn the world down before they accept a Donald Trump presidency and the U.S. pulling back as being the world police. They would rather the U.S. burn to the ground than China or Russia gain international supremacy. It's interesting. You know, I get it. I certainly do. Certainly do. You don't want China to rule the world or have that power, but to sacrifice everything in nuclear hellfire makes no sense. But let's talk about how Oliver Stone feels, and then we'll read some news about what's happening with the war. Deadline says Oliver Stone regrets voting for Biden. Oh, does he? Veteran filmmaker Oliver Stone has voiced his regret for voting for President Joe Biden, saying he fears the U.S. leader may take America into World War III. Bro, wake up and read the news. Have you been watching what's going on? This dude is dumping funding into active war with Russia. He may have already. Stone was speaking to UK commentator Russell Brand for his podcast Stay Free. Shout out Russell Brand, amazing show. When he said Biden is an old, cold warrior, and he really hates the old Soviet Union, which he confounds again with the Russian Federation, which is not communist. It seems that he's dragging us stupidly into a confrontation with a power that is not going to give. This is their borders. This is their world. This is NATO going into Ukraine. This is their whole other story. If we don't stop this, what Biden is doing, this guy, I voted for him. I made a mistake. I was thinking he was an old man now, that he would calm down, that he would be more mellow and so forth. I didn't see that at all. Stone added that in making his documentary, Ukraine on Fire, he had uncovered the causes of the conflict in Eastern Europe. You have to look at the reasons for this war. And whatever you do, the Americans like to simplify and say it's a question of Russian invasion of Ukraine. That's very simplistic and very black and white. He added that his doc explains the origins of this war in a coup d'etat of 2014, which was sponsored and supported thoroughly by the United States. It was a very deep plan to penetrate the Russian Federation. And that's basically what I was talking about. Having been there on the ground, the argument is that the goal of what was going on in Ukraine was to remove the pro-Russian president. Now, he wasn't exactly as Yanukovych. He wasn't necessarily pro-Russia, but he was not giving the West what they wanted. He's basically playing it up both sides, doing right by the people of Ukraine, as I've been told and have read. Granted, I could be wrong. I don't know. I don't have access to private intelligence. But the general idea was that Russia said, hey, we're going to give you all these things if you side with us, the Russian Trade Federation, which includes a bunch of other countries in the region. Some said that Vladimir Putin wants to rebuild the Soviet Union. However, a lot of people in Ukraine, the people I met, these are regular people. I didn't go to like special secret meetings. I'm walking around in the street. They want to be part of the European Union. They want access to the Schengen zone, and they fear Russia because of, I don't know, nightmarish things like the Holodomor. They don't want to be a part of Russia. Now, in the eastern regions, sentiment is very, very different. And Yanukovych was basically like, who's going to give us the better deal? Who's going to give the good deal? We've got the leverage. And this is where things go south. When the U.S. comes in knocking and says, take the deal or else, Yanukovych said, look, we got Russia at our back. If you screw with us, I want a real deal. Offer my people good incentives, access to the Schengen zone. Russia was saying, hey, we'll give you this, that, or otherwise. And finally, what happens? Well, many sources believe, and they could be wrong, I don't know, just stuff you read on the internet and various reports, Oliver Stone seems to believe it. U.S. intelligence said, we're going to remove this guy because he won't do what we want. And then you get Zelensky. I mean, granted, there were other people in between, of course, Poroshenko. Russia says, no way. This is the U.S. basically stealing this. And as I've described before, you know what we're getting with this is soft power and the U.S. exertion of rather successfully. Vladimir Putin, on the other hand, his soft power didn't work. He doesn't have the money. He's the BRICS nations. They can't compete with the petrodollar. They're trying to. So when it came to what's going on in Ukraine, he lost the soft power battle and resorted to hot conflict, an invasion. Well, Donald Trump was president and it wasn't happening. And that's good news for all of us. We don't want active conflict and war. And Putin was probably thinking, like, let's see how Trump handles this. And Trump's attitude was, for one, he did send weapons to Ukraine for sure, but he was crushing ISIS. He was saying, get our troops out of Syria, get our troops out of Afghanistan. And Russia was like, it is a good thing that the U.S. is pulling out of these areas. Now, the argument from many in the United States who are more into the, I don't know, more neocon, neolib, more hawkish think, it's because Vladimir Putin and China want to move in, and China certainly did. Once U.S. troops were pulled from Afghanistan, China started making its move to go in. They want access to that lithium. So you can make the argument. And I think this is a scary thing. I don't want war. I think Biden's miserable. I think these people are deeply corrupt, and you do not get to rule by secrecy. If it is so true that these horrible things are happening in the world, then you need to win the culture. I say that to the United States and their intelligence agencies but I don't believe it. I think they're just lying for power. And this is a country that is of, for, and by the people, as it's supposed to be. So when you lie, cheat, and steal, and you think it's for the betterment of America, I don't believe you because you're liars and you do dirty things. But the reality is it's not so simple. If we do back down and lose some of these conflicts, it's entirely possible that China does move in, does take over these regions. Russia does come to their aid. They do launch their own reserve currency, their gold-backed currency, displacing the United States. And then you see the real tyranny of the Chinese Communist Party. We do not want a multipolar world. So I don't have all the answers for you, my friends. I certainly can tell you that avoiding World War III is preferable. But there's also the reality of a global superpower, China, that displaces and oppresses us. Depends on what you are willing to tolerate. That's why I think World War III is a real possibility. In this article from NBC News, they show you a brief little clip of a drone strike. Drones target Russian capital on eve of military parade attended by Putin. The defense ministry described the incident as an attempt by the Kiev regime to launch a terror attack by unmanned aerial vehicles. It's a whole new world of warfare. Benny Johnson has the video. You know, I don't know if I can actually, I think we should play it. It doesn't show any harm to anybody. It just shows a military strike. So we'll play this for you real quick. Here's the video. Here's what I want you to understand. This video right here. Igor Sushko on Twitter, verified. He says he was born in Ukraine, American, says the target of the drone strike in Moscow was a secret Ministry of Economic Development office on the 10th floor of the skyscraper. At least 6 government ministries occupied this building. The offices are guarded by Putin's Federal Protective Service, FSO. Perhaps that's true. I don't know. There's just something I want to convey to you with this video that I found profound. The video is simple. It's a man driving on a highway showing the massive hole in the side of what appears to be some kind of civilian building, hit by a drone strike, apparently, or considering the damage, I don't believe it's a drone strike. You take a look at it, and what you see is just this floor is blown out. The glass, the windows below it and above it are intact, suggesting to me probably wasn't a drone strike. I'd imagine a drone strike would have, especially of the magnitude we just witnessed, a larger blast radius. The top and bottom floors should be shattered as well. But hey, what do I know? I'm not an expert on military strikes or anything like that. What you end up getting is just a civilian building blown out. I want you to imagine that you're driving down the highway in your town, in your city. I'm sure you've driven through areas like this. Being from Chicago, there are a ton of areas, especially when you're driving on I-95 or 90 coming into the city. You drive past a bunch of these buildings in the northwest suburbs. And that's what this looks like to me. And that's the vision I got. Driving through the suburbs with these tall buildings into the city, and you see someone blew it up. That's crazy. World War III is a very real possibility, my friends. We have this article from express.co.uk, which apparently just doesn't want to load. Okay, well, I guess we don't get to read it. Let's see if we can pull it up here. Belarus completes new facility for nuclear missiles as NATO braces for World War III. Well, I guess Express is down, but that was the headline. Russia's latest threat to NATO and the world strikes just 600 feet from Romania, spark fresh fears of World War III amid warning Wagner Group could be sent to disrupt vital grain supplies. Ladies and gentlemen, we may be staring down the barrel of World War III, as I've now said maybe a couple dozen times. I don't know everything. I can't see the future. And I think the most important thing for all of you to understand is this. I do not have access to privy information. I do not have any confidential, any secret information. No, all I have is reading news articles, which means I'm probably dead wrong about everything. You know, I was talking to some friends about military technology and nuclear weapons. It's like 100-year-old technology. Okay, it's like 80-year-old technology. 80-year-old technology, right? 75 or whatever. Do you think that U.S. interests just stopped there? What do we know about? We know about directed energy weapons. We know about laser-induced plasma channels, like my favorite military weapon, which they don't really use, but would be cool. A laser-induced plasma channel. It's basically like a laser gun. The way it works is and they've had this for a long time. This is like over a decade. They've probably had it for a lot longer than that. A laser supercharges a direct path through the air, creating a shorter path for an electrical charge. Basically, they can point this cannon at you and shoot you with a bolt of lightning. Crazy. It's called the laser-induced plasma channel. Some people, if you look on YouTube, have made very, very simple ones. There's a really cool video where you have a doorway with laser-induced LIPCs, they call them, and you can just see streaks of electricity shooting between the door, creating some kind of very painful barrier if you were to walk through it. It'll hit you with electrical charge. That's just one example of weapons that most people aren't even aware exists. And there are a bunch of other crazy weapons possible. Now, when we see stuff like this, these drone strikes, I also want people to understand antimatter weapons. Antimatter, when it comes into contact with what I guess what you'd call traditional matter, I don't know, positively charged matter, it has a perfect 100% annihilation, energy release. So theoretically, very, very small antimatter bombs could be massive, massive. We've produced some antimatter. We do it with those Large Hadron Collider, the Large Hadron Collider as super colliders, basically. That's how we produce it. And then we store the antimatter in magnetic rings so they don't come into contact with other matter because then they would... But I wonder, Are we working on some kind of antimatter weapon? We don't know. When the nukes were being built, the A-bomb, nobody knew it was being built. Go see Oppenheimer, I guess. Compartmentalization. There was speculation the U.S. was working on some crazy top-secret project, but nobody knew exactly what it was. Some thought it might be a death beam, a laser, some kind of directed energy weapon. No, it was the atomic bomb. And then we went and dropped it on Japan. Truman. Right now, what we're seeing with Russia, with Kiev, and all of this stuff, man, we have no idea the devastation that may occur. Cyber warfare could blow up nuclear power plants. They talk about, oh, there's bombs on the Zaporizhzhia power plant. They could probably blow it up remotely using a simple line of code. I've seen examples of this at the Black Hat conference 12 years ago, 11 years ago. Or actually, I think this was, 9 years ago. These hackers said with simple lines of code, they can increase the pressure by lying about the temperature and cause a pump facility to explode. And that could be in a nuclear power plant. It could be in an oil refinery. It can be a water treatment plant. They can blow it up, shut it down. They also explained how you could send a drone within 40 miles of one of these facilities and transmit the code, causing chaos. We don't even know what's to come. In the meantime, in the United States, Joe Biden is being accused of very serious crimes. We've got internal conflict and division currently underway. Referrals for Fauci to be sent to jail. Criminal charges. Joe Biden facing a potential impeachment. If war does break out, at this point, I wonder if we do get involved, if the U.S. is openly in active conflict with that strike near Romania, is it possible that the U.S. just crumbles? If we get involved in active World War III, I have to imagine this country will be ripped apart from the inside. You're going to have almost every single anti-war leftist. You're going to have, there's no justification. There's going to be no pro-war sentiment. Every Trump supporter. Chaos. But we'll see, my friends. My question for you is, what is your plan? Because failure to plan is planning for failure. I'm not saying to run to the hills. I'm not saying become a prepper. I'm saying, have you thought about what happens in the event of full-scale war? I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.